Welcome
Welcome back.
to episode unknown because I have lost track of the amount of times.
We've been on a good roll, I think. We hope that you're enjoying these episodes. If you are a recurring listener, watcher,
Yeah.
let us know, because if there are any specific topics that you want us to discuss or any thoughts that you have, we really want to know. All feedback is welcome. So yeah, definitely let us know how you're finding the podcast. But today is New Year's Day. Can we say Happy New Year at this point?
I think we should, yeah. Because it is, I think it's the 1st of January. 2024 though.
1st of January on a Monday as well.
The stars are a little bit too aligned.
It's exciting though. A new year, I think, is always very exciting. To be honest, I'm very, very glad to see the back of 2023. I cannot lie.
I feel like it was quite a nice year. Like it's, every year is going to have like its absolute dumps. Yeah. But I feel like it was still like a really special year for you.
It was, yeah, actually, I think I'm focusing a bit too much on the negatives. I literally got married. Whoops. Do you know what though? I've still got my wedding coming up this year, 2024. So that is like what is in my brain right now. Is like, obviously I've had my nikah, which is an Islamic marriage, but in terms of like our legal ceremony and our main wedding day, we're still in the midst of planning that. So I still feel like I'm getting ready to get married. It's a really strange period to be in. But yeah, 2023 definitely had its challenges, but it also did have its high points. So yeah, all I can say is I'm very much looking forward to the new year. Looking forward to just what the new year actually for me is going to be it's my first year not having a job. What the hell?
Oh my God, I just realized that as well. That's so exciting. That's like a whole year of just like opportunity.
Yeah, I know what's terrifying though is the fact that like I have no idea where I'm going to be like this time next year. Like actually no clue. Because I feel like just for context as well, I just dropped it in there, but I was actually made redundant recently in my full-time job. So I'm no longer a corporate girly or a 9-to-5er. I'm just swimming along, finding my own way at this point. So yeah, it's just been a huge life adjustment and I guess because it's come at this time where we're literally entering a new year, I think in more ways than one, I'm trying to like make adjustments in my life and stuff. And it's just weird knowing that obviously I have goals and things, but I have no way of knowing like where my year is going to end up, because there's no like part of my life that is defined right now, like i.e. having a job that is just consistent.
I feel like that says a lot about how much we let our jobs and our like the thing that fills up the most of our time like define everything else. Because I just heard you say that. I just heard you say, obviously I'm listening to you, but what I heard was
good to know.
what I heard was that, okay, you feel like completely undefined about this time next year, like a year from now. And like in my head I'm thinking, well, surely like you've got goals or like things you can work backwards from. But then I thought, well, a lot of those actually come from, okay, well, if I get to X position at work, then I can think about going on this holiday, or then I can think about picking up this hobby because I would feel more accomplished, or what, like things like that.
Yeah, it's about your salary increasing, promotions, like how your career is developing. Whereas now that's all gone. Like now I'm on my own. Now I have to kind of, it's like you go from being put on a path and being sat on a path that's kind of carved out for you in a way to like literally having to create your own. I think that is the difference, and that's like the terrifying part, but also a very exciting thing.
Yeah,
it's
very
just
exciting.
The freedom.
And then saying that, actually, so I know that you're really good and into manifesting because I watched your videos actually before I even met you. But how many of your like manifestations, or if any, did actually come back down to your career?
In what way?
Like, did you ever manifest things that were related or dependent on your career?
I think so. But so there was a stage of, there was a big period of my life where I was manifesting without even realizing it. Like there were things I was doing, and it was only when I look back now I realized what I was doing without knowing, because we all are. I think like when it comes to manifestations, so for example, when I was applying to unis and when I got into uni, I genuinely think I manifested that, like the uni I got into, because I wasn't even at school for half the year, like of my final year of my A-levels. I wasn't there, I was in hospital, and that was like a very tricky time of my life where it was so easy for me to have not got into uni, not got the grades I needed, and just had to like resit the year, for example. Like that was the big, there was just so much going on in that period of my life, and I actually have a whole YouTube video like dedicated to that because it was actually quite traumatic. But it was like a story time that I did, because my experience at sixth form in particular was a really awful one for so many reasons, but I still managed to get like my end goal. I still achieved it despite like all the stuff that happened during that period of time. And a big part of it was, I think, the manifestation and like how I actually achieved what I wanted to, despite all the odds. In my head, like it was almost like an impossible task, like me actually getting to uni that year. Like it genuinely was. So things like that, I guess in a way it's career related, because without then going to uni, getting the grade I got at uni for my degree, then I wouldn't have got my grad job. So it all did have like a knock-on effect. But at that time I didn't realize I was manifesting. I didn't realize that the things I was doing were related to that. And I think like also when it comes to manifesting, is people obviously have very different like interpretations in terms of like who they're speaking to. Are they speaking to God? Are they speaking to the universe? Are they speaking to a genie in a bottle? Like there's very like different ways that people interpret it, but I think like the way in which you do it can be like the same. There's also different forms of manifestation, and so when I bought my flat, I used visualization meditations, and they're like a very different form of manifestation, and I genuinely feel like manifesting played a part. Like me actively, at that point I was actively doing it, and I knew what I was doing, and I knew there was a goal, and I was doing it for a purpose. And that definitely played a part in me actually getting my flat, because I got it in the middle of COVID, and again there was such a huge like, there's so many barriers, and I still I think I remember telling you about like how awful my experience was with my solicitor, and like there was just so much that kind of went wrong at that time, but I still pulled through and it still happened. There's also an element of like just fate and things happening because they're meant to happen. Like I also believe in that a lot. Like if something is genuinely meant to happen for you, it will also happen regardless. But I do also think there's a balance of things that have to happen. Like when you have a goal and you're trying to achieve something, you obviously have to put the work in. That you're not going to get anything just by asking the universe for it.
Yeah. You
have to put the work in, but then you also have to be really intentional with your thoughts and emotions and how you behave in relation to that thing. Like this is basically the definition of manifestation, but if you're like constantly worrying about it not happening, or thinking of it not coming into fruition, or you not having that thing, then you're just not going to get it, because that's the level you're at, not having it. But if the point of manifesting is to put yourself in a position where you're actually excited about having it, you already feel like you've got it, you have no doubt in your mind that you're going to achieve it, and you do everything you can to achieve it, but then your mind doesn't get in the way of you actually achieving it in the end as well, because I feel like that happens to a lot of people, and it happens to me too. Like I've never always gotten everything I wanted, but I know the things that I've got are because I've done certain things that are manifestation related that have got me to that point.
And I think it's super interesting, because like when you say there, you haven't got all the things you wanted, and I think about that too. Like there's so many things I've wanted in my life and I've not gotten all of them, and I'm the same as you. I always think, there's a reason for everything, and I love the really comforting thought that's kind of related to manifestation, I think, is when opportunities that you want don't come to you. It's like something that wasn't actually for you. And I have trouble with that sometimes, because sometimes I can really feel how much I want something, and when it doesn't end up being for me, I'm like, okay, so is this a lesson on like having confidence that I can still have those same feelings for the things that are meant for me? Like I can't let this missed opportunity or this failure take away from like my willingness to still believe that the other things I want for myself, I still like deserve them and they'll still come to me? Like, is it a lesson in that way? Or is it just kind of like life just like playing out and, just, like you say, like fate just writing itself there? Because I really struggle with like the flip side of manifestation, when like things don't happen but you want them to happen as well. But I used to think all of this was such woo-woo. Probably I want to say like early 2022. I remember having a conversation with my friend. I asked her, I was like, so what do you think of manifestation? Like, do you believe in it? And I remember at the time thinking, like, is she gonna think I'm crazy for bringing this up? And I just started binge watching like all these YouTube videos. And the thing I struggle with manifestation is that a lot of the discourse online is a lot of like young, like American girls talking about it, which always makes me feel like, I don't know, like it's not legit almost. Not that what young people say isn't legit, but it's more like I find it hard to like believe, especially with manifestation being so like such a spiritual and almost science-backed thing. I almost find it hard to believe when I can't see like everyone talking about it and everyone talking about the different ways you can manifest as well. Like you've touched on that. There's so many different ways to manifest things, and I can see that now, having like learned a lot about like goal setting, visualization. I had a very similar experience with visualization, because when I was applying for my grad job, I was told directly to my face that something wouldn't happen. Like it was impossible for it to happen. And then a couple of months later it happened, and I ended up getting the very thing I wanted that I told was completely impossible. And I used to sit, and I think it was just I thought it was obsession. Like I would just sit and like visualize myself. It was my grad job in Edinburgh. Like I would visualize myself going into the office. I didn't even know what the office looked like. Going into the office, like meeting my friends, getting coffee in the morning, like doing my work, having like a new little notepad to do all my like to-do lists. I can remember like the specifics of what I used to think about. And probably very similarly to you, I was like accidentally like manifesting something I really wanted by being so obsessive over it. But it's so interesting now, because like I've like lost the ability and like will to do that now. And I don't know if it's because I'm like I've grown up a little bit more and I can like see, like I can see sometimes like how, I don't know, like realistic I have to be with things. But then it comes back down to what you said about like, if you can imagine something not happening in your head, you're putting that chance of it not happening like out
It's
there
the focus,
as well.
yeah. But I understand what you're saying, because I'm quite similar. So when I was younger, I think the reason why I manifested so easily and without realizing is I was such a daydreamer. Just by nature. I would always be in my own head and like just imagining different scenarios, and just I feel like that was a bit of an escapism for me. And I did that, but then not realizing that all these positive like scenarios that I would make up in my head and they'd come to life, but I never really realized that there was a correlation between me genuinely like obsessing over these things and like constantly thinking about it or creating these scenarios to it like actually playing out in real life. And that can happen negatively as well. Like if you think about like bad things or like worry something bad is going to happen, like that can manifest in your own life as well. So you have to be quite careful of like the things you focus on. It does come true. So yeah, but as I've gotten older, obviously I don't have that. I don't know if it's a personality trait or what. Like I just don't daydream as much. Like I guess there's just too much more going on in my days.
I was just about to ask you, like, does growing up kill our like daydreaming ability? Does it make us like less creative because we see like the realities of the world? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, because I definitely I don't know if it's just like life gets a hold of you when you're an adult, as in there's not that much going on in your life when you're little, in terms of like you go to school, you have your exams, you have your friends, maybe dramas there, but in terms of like the amount that you have to like have on your plate and deal with and juggle as an adult, it does take away a bit of the magic out of just like, yeah, you don't really have the time, I think, to just escape unless you're sleeping and it's a genuine dream. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there's not really many times in the day where you can just sit down and conjure up some imaginary dream of like what you want your reality to look like.
Yeah.
I feel like it is a bit of a childish thing in a way, not in like a negative way, but just in like that's what kids do versus
Yeah, there's
as
no
an
ceiling on
adult.
things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of reminds me of like scripting. I've heard of scripting as well, when you
Yeah.
kind of like write down all these like wildly imaginative scenarios that you want to come to life in like your own real life. I feel like that is like the adult version of daydreaming potentially, because you have to sit down and think about the most impossible dreams you have and like write them as if they were real.
You just made me realize I actually did that when I was getting the house that I bought.
Did you? What did you do?
Scripting. So I would literally write out as if what my life looked like, and that's actually crazy. I forgot I did that.
Oh my god, you're actually just like manifesting all the time and not even clocking it.
But I think so. At the time when I was doing it, it was intentional. But like you forget about it sometimes. Like,
Yeah.
and I think that's the important thing. You have to like let go a little bit of like, so you have to know something is gonna happen. Trust in it. Like actually do whatever method you're doing. So visualizing, scripting, and just like I think the reason you do these things as well, like visualizing, imagining it, or writing it down, is because you have to be so specific when you're trying to get something to actually come into your life.
Yeah.
If you're very general, you might actually manifest something, but in the form that you didn't want it. So, and you might not even realize that you manifested it, because when it comes into your life, you think, that's not what I want. Like, why is this happening? But actually you did, you just weren't specific, or it was something that you were thinking of. But
That's very interesting.
You weren't like pinpointing enough to the point where the reality is actually what you want to come into your life. So
Yeah.
when you write it down, you make it so clear, and you actually write down what a typical day looks like when you've got that thing, or when that thing is involved in your life. Then when you know that you can picture it really clearly, and you have that image, but then you also accept that image as it's true and it's happening regardless of anything else. And then you kind of let it go. Feel like I sound really woo-woo, like even talking about it.
No, honestly, you don't. Because, well, I say you don't. It's probably because I've gotten into it as well.
Yeah.
I used to think it was woo-woo. But it is more like, it is like a level of self-delusion where like you wholeheartedly believe that something is for you, and then it just happens. And I saw somewhere on the internet, I came across this analogy about the whole letting it go thing. And it really helped me understand how to let something go. And it was this lady, and she was talking about basically like if you had like an Amazon Prime subscription or something, and your order every day is your current set of habits. And because your current set of habits, you've had them your entire life, your like algorithm knows what you're going to order every day. So it's like really easy to prepare and give it to you. So like your order every day does arrive the next day, and you just get it, and like you just make the same order, and blah blah blah. It keeps happening. And she was saying like when you're trying to achieve either new goals, or you've got like new aspirations for your life, and you put that order into Amazon. So just sticking with this like Amazon analogy, she was saying like with manifestation, okay, so you, for example, you scripted out this order and you've got all the details in it, and you've checked out and the order is confirmed. It's up to Amazon to now find that thing and send it to you. But because it's like not part of your daily routine, your algorithm's now trying to find something new for you, it's going to take some time to find it, because you know that's just the algorithm, which is I think a mini analogy for life. And you just have to know that you've placed that order, you've checked out, you've paid the money, the order's confirmed, you can track it. We can't track it in real life. But it's coming, and like you've done what you needed to do. You scripted it and you placed the order. Now let Amazon do what it has to do. And I guess like Amazon is like the person that represents maybe like the universe. Yeah. And your new orders are just like new habits or new goals that you're trying to achieve. And I really like that analogy, because it really helps me understand like at what point I let go. At what point I keep like scripting or keep trying to keep that goal in my head as well. But I think letting it go I also think is really important, because I think the more you obsess, and again, I'm going to sound woo-woo as well, but like the more you obsess over something, the more you keep it like in the confinement of your head rather than like letting it become like real.
Yeah. It's still just like a figment of your imagination that you're holding on to versus like letting it become real life. If you're obsessing and you're excited for it, I think that's a different thing, because it's like that matches the level of energy that you need, because you're going to be excited when you get it. Yeah. So that's where you're going to be at when you actually receive it. Whereas if you're obsessing over it, but you obsessing because you don't, like, you keep checking the order, seeing if it's been shipped, or you don't really know, like you don't fully believe that it's coming, and you're just like unsure and obsessing, thinking of it, that's a lack mindset, and that's you thinking, that's you operating in a place where like you don't actually think it can be reality.
Yeah. And I think so, on my journey from thinking all of this was woo-woo to now believing every single bit I feel about it, one thing I really like about learning about this kind of, I don't know, area of life is the actionable and practical stuff that you can do like daily to help believe it, help stop thinking it's woo-woo. And one of the things that helped me to, because I had a really bad like scarcity mindset. I still do sometimes, very ebb and flow. But I came from a very specific place of just always thinking that the things that I wanted for myself would never like be mine. And like you said there, when you're all you can focus on in your head is like all of these things that you don't have, like you just said, you'll never be able to like meet the universe at the place that it's able to give you all the things that you do want. And the way to try and like swap that mindset and like try and stop focusing on what you don't have, and we've spoken about like gratitude practices before, but gratitude practices, actually all they mean is that you just change what you think about every single day. So like when you wake up, instead of thinking about, oh, I wish I had a nicer car to drive to work in, you think about how you can actually get to work in a car.
Like, versus public transport.
Yeah, versus something else. Or, you know, like there's always elements of things that you have that you can be grateful for. There's so many things in life to be grateful for, full stop. But it's like changing what you actually focus on, because that in itself, and I think I've spoken about this analogy before, it's like the whole red car thing. Like if you think about a red car, all you start seeing is red cars, because that's just like how your brain works. So if you start thinking about like the things that you do have in your daily life, you don't have to sit there and like meditate and like write down pages and pages of gratitude. It's just that one thought you have to flip, and you have to try and flip it every day, and like you'll see yourself that you just become that person that like automatically feels grateful sometimes. And like I've become that in the weirdest way. Like I would have not predicted, because I'll be taking the bins out and I'll be like grateful that I like have a flat that's like got a bin that's full of like food cuttings and stuff from all the meals I've made from the week, and I get to like go and take it out. It's just really random like moments of gratitude that I find.
What the hell?
That's what I mean.
I don't know if I've reached that stage, because I'm so grateful for the things in my life, but there are some things that you know, like you just naturally get frustrated over, and it takes a lot more effort for me to like reframe the mindset. But that's so nice that you can do that quite easily with something as stinky and horrible as a bin.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't know, it's like certain moments, obviously it doesn't happen all the time, and I'm not this super calm grateful person at all, but it happens so much more often than it ever did before. I
think
can't remember. Yeah, exactly. That's the point.
Is even just like increasing it a little bit, because it grows as well. Like the more it's like things like that are infectious. I feel like the same way as like misery like breeds
company.
Yeah, so it's almost like the more you go to one side of the spectrum, the easier it is to like keep going down that path. Whereas if you're on the other side and you're constantly thinking of the negatives and things, it's just so easy to like just breed more of that, think more of that, and like, and the weird part is when you're more negative and you're more like thinking of those things, and then those things happen in your life, and then it gives you more reason to be negative.
Yes.
And you just end up in this constant cycle, and then you get people that just complain about how catastrophic their life is, and how things just like keep like bad things keep happening, and then they have more things to complain about. And it's just like at some point you've got to break the chain. At some point you've got to like just find a way to stop focusing on those things, because we all have like horrible things happen in our lives. Like, I don't think there's anyone on the planet that really like can say at any stage of their life that they've never like come across like something difficult or something like bad has happened to them, or they've had something that they've like challenging that they've had to deal with. It happens to us all, but I feel like you're just like more prone to it, I think, if you
Just
have
surrounded
yourself.
by it.
Yeah. And yeah, you also surround yourself with people. That's another thing, like the company that you keep is, you have to be so careful with, if you're wanting to manifest great things in your life and you've got a bunch of people around you who are constantly gossiping, backbiting, like just generally like maybe toxic, like negative people to be around, then you're going to find that a lot harder, because I feel like you kind of can get sucked into that a lot
Yeah.
more if you're around those people a lot more.
I think you're right. I think it's like when you're surrounded by that environment, you either become part of that environment or you feel guilty because you're surrounded by so much negativity. And I used to feel guilty sometimes when like friends like if a friend complained, and obviously like friends can have open conversation and it's really healthy and stuff like that, but sometimes I remember feeling guilty that like if a friend complained about something, it would bring me down to the point where like I didn't want to hear it sometimes, and like I knew it would affect the rest of my day, or like it would affect like the way I think about something, because all I can hear about like this one thing is negativity. So I think it's also important to acknowledge, if you are surrounded by maybe friends who just complain a lot or do have bad things going on, like it's okay to actually just prioritize your own kind of, I don't know, brain space, and like how much you can take of that, because it really does affect how you think about things and the kind of goals that you'd want to set for yourself, even if you feel like it doesn't. Because yeah, your environment really does influence, I think, the kind of person that you are, and the kind of goals you think that you're capable of setting and achieving for yourself.
Isn't there a saying that you are the average of like the 5 people closest to you? Something similar to that, where whoever you spend the most time with, generally that the average of those 5 people. So if they are like complainers, or they're quite negative, they have like bad self-talk maybe, or maybe they even project like their insecurities. There's ways that they manage their own life quite poorly that can, and it's not even like, I don't want to even sound silly in the sense that like, oh, just because someone else like manages their life one way doesn't mean that you can be friends with them. Like, people can have differences and stuff. I think there's a level beyond that where it's like, to the point, like I said before, people have stuff going on in their lives, and yeah, you as a friend you want to listen and support people, but then there's that, and then there's another side of the coin where people, maybe they just, nothing like catastrophic has happened, but they're the type of person that like any little minor inconvenience is like such a huge drama and like difficulty, and they have to just make a mountain out of a molehill, that kind of person.
Yeah.
And I feel like when you spend your time around people like that, then it does affect you as a person. Then you start thinking like things in your life, like things feel more difficult than they should be, or maybe your mindset shifts a little bit more into more similar to theirs, just because you're around that so much. And I feel like it's really difficult when you can't get away from people like that, or you're in a situation where like maybe you even live with people that are similar, have like that way of life. So there are like different scenarios that you can find yourself in, where like you have to kind of act in certain ways to get yourself in a position where you are surrounded by people that are quite healthy minded and positive and have a good outlook on life and things. Friends, I think, are a bit easier to kind of cut off or distance yourself from, because there's no real tie. Like, you don't, like family versus friends, like especially if you're living with people in their household. I used to get a lot of like messages actually about these girls a message saying that their mum like picks on them, and like obviously like quite critical, but then also like, family dynamics are just not always that healthy sometimes. So when you're constantly surrounded by people like that, maybe they're super judgy. I feel like in our community is very much that sense of like judging others a lot, judging your kids a lot. And then and it's quite funny because then even when I see on TikTok these days, I've seen some TikToks of some girls being like, you can tell who are the girls that are going to grow up to be the aunties.
Yeah.
Because it just like filters through, because when you spend your time around those people, and it can't be helped, like your own parents or your family members doing this, and then you kind of take on that role in your adulthood.
Yeah.
But I feel like you just need to be aware that that is happening and that you are kind of being molded by your environment, and you have to make a conscious choice of whether to actually, if it's an environment that you can't escape from or like get yourself some distance from, you just have to acknowledge that there's a difference between their mindset and yours, and you have to just kind of set those boundaries, I guess. But mentally, if you can't do them physically.
Yeah. And I think that's actually one of my goals for this year, this brand new spanking year. I want to surround myself with people who are like 10 levels above me. Like, I want to try and put myself in an environment that I want to like be part of my future. And I actually don't know how to do that, especially knowing that I'd have to kind of do that online. Like, I don't know how I would do that in real life. But then I don't know if that just comes back to like, oh, am I just trying to stay comfortable by trying to like want things to fit into like how I do life now?
Well, I get, in a way, because if you're trying to fit your new life into your current life, then you're in your current life, right? But I get what you're saying. Like, I have a similar goal in terms of, or like something that I've just been thinking about a lot in general. I saw this video a bit ago about how if you're like the richest or the most intelligent person in the room, then you're in the wrong room.
Yeah.
And that really resonated with me, because I never really, like, I feel like my imposter syndrome and my insecurities get in the way of me allowing myself to enter rooms that I feel like I'm not good enough to be in. So if I was to be the person that's less intelligent or anything like just more inferior, or if I felt that way, I wouldn't allow myself to be there because I feel like I shouldn't be there. But actually, your mindset should be the complete opposite. You should be entering spaces where you want to go, even if you're not quite there yet, whether that's mentally, physically, like if you're trying to like grow your money pot and you're not as wealthy as these people, but you want to learn how to be, and you want to be in that space where surrounded by people like that, you have to go for it. You have to actually put yourself in the positions. And I feel like that is actually a part of manifesting as well.
Yeah.
You're essentially putting yourself into the next step before even reaching it.
Yeah.
And I think that's like a physical form of manifesting something, because by doing that, like so many things happen as a result. Like you learn so much because you're around the people that are already in the position that you want to be in. You have that better outlook because instead of being surrounded by people that are not at the stage where you want to be, then your mindset is going to shrink, and your potential or the opportunities that you think of are going to be a lot smaller because you're not around the people that have achieved huge things that you're actually trying to achieve and realize is possible. So there are so many things, so many benefits to actually like breaking out of that imposter syndrome or that inferiority complex and actually putting yourself in those spaces. But the question is, how do you do that? Because that's still something that I don't quite know like how to overcome, because you know when you're not at that stage yet, like how do you find those places to be in? Do you know what I mean?
I'm glad you brought this up because so when I did I took part in some induction training for some new graduates for the firm you used to work at. and one of the big pieces of advice I gave them was like, you should always strive to be the dumbest person in the room. And you know what you just said there about like not allowing yourself to enter these rooms, I feel like I kind of half do that and half don't, because I convince myself that I am the dumbest person in most rooms, but I don't know if I actually do you know what I mean?
Even when you're
know
not.
if I actually am. Yeah. It's like I don't know if I've stopped myself from getting into the room, but I have just convinced myself that I'm not good enough to be there. But one way I actually was going to try and do it this year It's a very small way, but it's whenever I'm in London or if I'm in any kind of new area, even, here in Edinburgh, I'm going to try and work in really, really posh upscale hotel lobbies.
I love that for you.
Because I feel like that's a good way to not only just observe the people who are like coming and going and like seeing them, like how they're dressed, what they're doing, trying to eavesdrop on their conversation, maybe why they're here, stuff like that. But I feel like that's also a great way to like just, I don't know what the phrase is, bump shoulders or brush shoulders with people who are probably living the life that I want to live, in terms of like, I don't know if they're like remote working there or they're like there for some kind of meeting, whatever lifestyle or like stage of life they're in there. I can like intercept that by being in the hotel lobby for like a couple hours.
Yeah, that's interesting. I almost feel like what gets in my way is the idea that, so if I was to do something like that, and that's something that I think about a lot as well. So once I gave, as a bit of a joke, but I kind of wasn't joking as well. This girl asked me this is like dating advice though. She asked me like where to find a man, or like how do people find people in this day and age? It's quite difficult. And as a joke, I was like, just go to a rich neighborhood and sit in a coffee shop and you can bump into someone there. And I was kind of like, if you want a certain type of person, then you got to go to certain type of places to seek them out. Do you know what I mean?
Because
like,
they have hobbies.
Yeah. But then on the flip side, I'm like, okay, so this is in a business sense now, not in a dating sense. But if I was to go to somewhere that I knew rich people were, that type of people that are in positions that I want to be in, but I just sit there and I'm the type of person that's too afraid to like strike up conversation with someone. I would never like just approach someone, and even when someone approaches me, I'm just so awkward. So I feel like that's a barrier that I need to like fix first, in terms of just being less socially awkward. I don't know what the term is, but I'm just so like in my own shell a bit that even if I went to those places, I would just sit there silently and not interact with anyone, and probably glean nothing from that experience.
I hear you. I feel you. I kind of relate to it completely. But also, I want to challenge you on what you just said there about fixing it first before you do it.
Yeah.
Because that is something I feel like we've touched on in a previous episode. We cannot, like, we will never, like, people like us who overthink and like focus on like the things about us that make us not good enough, blah, blah, blah. We will never move forward if we try and do something that we think is necessary to do before we get to that stage. Like you saying you need to fix your, like, I don't know, like, I guess that's kind of self-confidence or self-assuredness first. You're just putting a blocker to actually just going to that hotel lobby and working there, because you can go to the hotel lobby like as many times and just have to deal with like this is what I've told myself. I'm just going to deal with the fact that I'm going to have awkward conversations with people, because I'm so awkward when I'm networking and when I'm like meeting new people. Yeah, I know, I hate it, but I'm gonna hate it less the more often I do it. And like there's no way for me to become used to doing it if I don't just go and like friggin' put myself in that situation and just like hate the first few times of doing it. And I did it a couple of weeks ago in London, and I did exactly what you said you were gonna. I just sat there.
I can already picture myself doing it before I even
like headphones on, like staring at, I actually got some good work done, but still you want to look like open and like receptive to maybe someone being like, I don't know, just someone trying to strike up a conversation with you. So I think you just have to do it. And I think we mentioned it in a previous episode as well. It's like, it's all about the action. It's not like, we can't think too much. We can't put too much thought into doing the first step perfectly. We have to make, oh my God, it's like sloppy action. It's that thing that was going viral on TikTok. Like imperfect action is better than perfect inaction, because imperfect action is actually going to take you forward, and perfect action is going to just keep you at home, like wanting to do it but never actually doing it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think so. This whole sloppy action thing, I actually really believe in, like just taking any form of action instead of just being stuck where you are. But I feel like I find it a lot easier to do that when people aren't involved, because when people are involved and then I mess up or I say something stupid, or like that'll live in my head forever, and just the thought of that stresses me out so badly. So I almost think that, so say if I did go and took that sloppy action and just went anyway, and then I had like an awkward encounter that was obviously very much my fault.
No, it's not always your fault. Again, so you're trying to like make it your fault.
Well, in my head.
Yeah, in your head, it's always going to be you.
Because I know how awkward I can be. I would assume that, it was, let's say in this scenario, it was my fault, but then I already knew that was going to happen because I know that I can just get a bit uncomfortable in those situations. Then if that's happened, then how do I fit? I feel like I'd still be in the same position where like I'm still awkward and I still don't know how to fix it. So I'm just now going out publicly, creating situations for myself to be awkward in, but then how do I learn from it? I don't know.
Well, I don't have the answers. Like the answers lie in you doing it more often, honestly.
But that's what I mean. The more often I do it, I don't know.
You would get better though. Like there's no situation in which the more you do something, the worse you get it.
I feel like that's what I'm convincing myself of. The more I do it, the more embarrassing I'm gonna be.
And I also feel like you're definitely giving, like, what I'm getting from you is that you really need like proof of like an end goal or an outcome before you commit to something.
I think so too.
Whereas you need to like venture into the unknown.
Yeah, I hate the unknown. I think that's my real issue.
Same.
I at least need something to draw from, like someone else's experience or something. Like I feel like I operate like that a lot in a lot of situations.
But the way I try to make myself feel better about like knowing that those like awkward, uncomfortable moments with strangers, like I know it's gonna live like rent free in my head. But the way I make myself okay with it is that I convince myself it's going to be this funny story I'll be able to tell when someone's asking me how to make connections in a hotel lobby. Like, and I can be like, look, man, one day I was there and I completely messed up. I like dropped a fork on.
It's for the plot.
It's for the plot. That's exactly what I'm trying to say. Dropped a fork.
I think I need that mindset more often.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work out, it's for the plot.
Yeah. And because like also at the end of the day, even a handful of awkward conversations is not going to end anybody's world. It's also what I've taken away from having awkward conversations is that it always makes you seem and be like very human about a situation. Like I understand that it's awesome to be able to be like polished, confident, and like, I don't know, really well put together when you're making new connections and you're networking with people. I know that's like a really nice thing to be, and I do strive to be like that. But I also do appreciate in myself that it just makes me a lot more human when I do like fumble my words sometimes, or I do something awkward, and I just like allow myself to have that little quality, because that's never gonna go amiss. Like that's never gonna be a bad thing. And yeah, these situations are never going to like define you either way, I think.
I like that we have similar like things that we want to like do or accomplish, because I feel like when you have your own goals and you set yourself like certain things that you just want to, they don't even have to be goals, just like ways you want to be or like things you want to level up in.
Mm-hmm.
But then you almost feel, sometimes I think I get in my own head in terms of like demotivating myself or like trying to avoid, like I'll have something that I want to do, and then I find a reason to like avoid doing that said thing, or switching my attention to something else that I think is probably easier or something that I could achieve quicker. But
I think the way I've like, because I was very much the same as well, like I would kind of sometimes pull like things I wanted to do out of like a friggin' magic hat. Like I wouldn't actually think about why I wanted certain things in my life. And what I've started to do recently is like, because I'm quite a reflective person now, like a lot of the things I want to do are because of like things I maybe don't want that I've already had, or things I've experienced that I never want to experience again. And I think this thing about like trying to meet new, not specifically just from like a hotel lobby, but like generally like the goal as a whole is to have more, like surround myself with like a lot better quality people. And that's just because of like the lack of that in the past. And just being really like, I don't know, just being really clear about that this year. I was kind of like, look, like the quality of people that I've surrounded myself with have resulted in like things in my life that I'm not like too happy about. And there's a way I can change that. And a tiny part of that is like making new connections with people who are like a couple levels above me. And a way I can do that is obviously just like working in a hotel lobby. But it's kind of drawn from like experiences of my own life, if that makes sense. Yeah.
But I think that comes down to like whenever you have a goal, you have to have a purpose for it or like a why behind it. Otherwise, it's gonna be really hard like throughout the year to keep pushing forward towards it. Because if you don't have that why and you don't have a strong like purpose or reason you're doing it, then there's not much you can draw from to keep yourself at it. And if it gets difficult or you realize that yeah, it's just harder than you thought it was going to be to achieve, then you still have that motivation to be like, no, but I'm doing it for this reason. And I think that's a pretty solid reason because the people in your life is so important, like we've like touched on. Who you surround yourself with is so key, and it's so important to like when you get to our stage of life where you actually have no excuse to be surrounded by shitty people. Like you're not confined, except for work, I guess, but you're not confined to certain like environments and spaces 24/7 that you can very much like switch out like who you spend your time with, that you don't, nobody's forcing you to spend your free time with certain people or a lot of the time.
More choice.
Yeah, I feel like in your adulthood you have a lot more choice with like who you're around and the company you keep.
And I think going back to what you said about like having a really strong purpose behind like what you choose to aspire to, I think a really good way that I've used a couple of times when I've been like goal setting is the 5 why method. And obviously there's 5 whys in the method, but you can just keep asking yourself why as many times as you can get to the bottom of it. But it's all about like, if you have a goal, you ask yourself like why you want that goal, and you just keep asking yourself why until you get to like an absolute core reason. But it requires you to be like quite honest with yourself, because like for example, a lot of fitness goals of my own are down to like very personal like issues with my body and like the way I see myself and like my confidence and stuff. So it's like it requires a level of vulnerability with yourself, which hopefully is like okay to make peace with, because you don't have to expose yourself like that to anyone else. It's just more like you and like however you're documenting these goals. But I've really liked that as like a method to try and find like a very strong purpose behind some of the goals that you want. And I mean, if you're stuck on like actually like what goals to actually set, I feel like even finding like common goals or like example goals and then using the why process to drill down whether you actually do relate to it or not, or do want that in your life, is like a good way to filter out some things for yourself as well. But yes, I think direction is super important, and I'm really glad you mentioned that as well. So that was a super interesting conversation about manifestation. I think Farah, obviously I feel like Farah is just like really like I feel like you can talk forever about it, and it's really interesting to hear.
Yeah.
I know, it's really interesting to hear about like your experience about it. We can maybe go into like more detail in future episodes about like specific experiences, because I find it so fascinating, and I have been down many a rabbit hole on manifestation online on YouTube and stuff. But we hope you found this episode interesting, and you know, we hope that you had a lovely New Year's Eve period and that you are in like the midst of goal setting. I hope this helped kind of figuring out your purpose and getting some direction with those as well. Don't forget to give us a rating on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and we are on YouTube as well if you want to watch us in our new setup. New as of 2 episodes, I think. But yeah, and that is us for this week, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.